Welcome to You Are Not Alone. I am spiritual medium Erika Gabriel. This show is intended to bring expansion, understanding, and growth on our spiritual paths and journeys. This is a safe place to explore all things spiritual and beyond. Please remember, I am not a licensed therapist or medical doctor. Seek immediate professional help if you need mental health or physical health support. Hi, friends. Welcome back to You Are Not Alone. How are you? It has been an exciting week on my end, and pretty much the most exciting part is that I have this amazing guest on my show this week, and we have been going back and forth and looking for a time to connect. I actually was on her podcast, and then I think after we recorded, I was like, I think we talked for like an hour after we recorded, just as friends and connection. And it was just a really beautiful, seamless kind of ease in our connection and our friendship. It was just like, oh yeah, okay, so what are we talking about now?
I know you.
Yeah, we were just like, oh, hey girl, what's up? And now she's on You Are Not Alone. And I am so excited for you guys to hear her and connect with her and hear her story and the incredible things that she has learned and come to and how much she helps other people. As you know, I really protect this community in a positive way and really just bring you only people that I really trust because I honor each of you so much. And I trust Amy. I really admire her. And I think she's an amazing person. I can't wait for you guys to hear this episode and be with her. Her name is Doc D. She's a Doc D. Doc D.
I like Doc D. Doc D.
Doc D. It sounds like an endearing term.
Yeah, it does.
But actually, she's a doctor, Dr. Amy Robbins. She has a doctorate in clinical psychology. She's a spiritual intuitive, and she also is the host of the podcast we were talking about, her successful podcast, Life, Death, and the Space Between, which has out of this world guests and incredible insights. And a quote that I love about Amy. It says, Amy uses death as the lens to awaken us to life. Isn't that so powerful? She's an amazing person, and welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Erika. We were like, we got to get recording because we're having too much fun talking and this is good stuff.
Yeah, we've already talked for 25 minutes.
We'll share with you all the good nuggets that we talked about before. Well, some of them.
Yeah. She was saying a lot of good stuff. I'm like, wait, I need to write this down. And then I was like, no, just hit record.
Right.
Come on. It's a podcast. Record it. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm so happy.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I'm so honored.
Well, it was cool because I was thinking about you and about what you do and about what I know of you. And what's amazing is there is still so much as we and all the listeners, I know my listeners so well, like we are so into spiritual seeking and looking at things and getting to the heart of the matter. But spirituality and connecting to spirit as a means for improving life is still so stigmatized in many, many ways. I have people that call me for readings and they're like, yeah, I kind of like this, woo-hoo stuff. And I'm like, okay, what does that even mean? What's woohoo? But it's so stigmatized. And what's amazing about you is that you have a doctorate in clinical psychology. So you have this incredible mind, and you have now, and probably at the same time, tapped into your incredible spiritual intuition. And how do those things come together? How did they come together for you? And how do you marry those two things in what you do?
So I'm like ready to burst and to share all of it. So how I came to it was how I think many people open up to spirituality if they aren't sort of born. I'm not like I wasn't a born medium, where some people say like when they were children, they remember having these experiences. I lost my aunt when she was around my age now, 24. She was 47 or 48 and I was 18 at the time. And she died from complications from juvenile onset diabetes. She was waiting for a kidney and pancreas transplant. And in order for her to withstand the transplant, they made sure her heart was strong enough. And so it wasn't. So they went in to do heart surgery and they couldn't repair her heart. And so she died on the table. And I was in college at the time and came home for a very short period of time, went right back to school, and was in the throes of what I now know was grief. At the time, I didn't. She was like a second mother to me. My family is extremely close. She had gone through a really rough divorce. And so she had spent a lot of time at my house during real formative years for me, early teenage years and everything. And it really shook me to my core to have someone so close to me die in that, what I call an out of order death, right? It just didn't make sense. It wasn't a grandparent. It wasn't a great grandparent. She had young kids. My cousins were 22 and 17 at the time. I mean, really young, to have lost their mother. And it just really sent me on this path of grief and loss and anxiety. I was like petrified of death and dying. I was so scared. A lot of young people had died too, like people that I was friendly with, and kind of random, a lot of drunk driving accidents and things like that. And so I really was like petrified to live, paralyzed almost. And
You were petrified to live, not die, almost.
petrified to live. Yeah.
To live,
Petrified
too,
to
'cause
live.
it's so
Mhm.
scary to be, yeah.
So scary.
I hear
Yeah.
that. Yep.
So anxiety took hold. I mean, that was really what my experience was. And I started therapy, and I was in therapy for a while. And when I went back to grad school, I decided to go back to grad school for clinical psychology. Around the time my cousin was getting married, I had what I now know was my first visit from my aunt. And she came to me at the time that, like, right before his wedding, and she showed me an image of my mom standing at her kitchen sink in our house where I grew up in. And she said, "Tell your mom not to be upset. I'm going to be at the wedding." And then I had another image of my uncle, and he was pushing my cousin in a stroller. My cousin was significantly younger, and he said, "Make sure you tell Uncle Richie that I hear him every time he talks to me. I know when he's speaking to me." And she showed me him pushing him, and she's like, "That's when he talks to me, and that's when I hear him." So I kind of woke up panicked. I looked at my husband, and I remember feeling like, don't go, like, stay. I want to talk to you more. Don't leave. And I turned to my husband and I said, "Aunt Linda was just here." He was like, "What?" "She was just here. She was just here." And called my mom. I said, "Mom, I just had this crazy dream. My Aunt Linda came to me and she said, 'Don't be upset. She's going to be at the wedding.'" And my mom started crying and she said, "I was standing at the kitchen sink last night," which was the same vision I saw. "And I was saying to her, 'How are you? I can't believe you're not going to be there. How are you not going to be at the wedding?'"
Oh,
And then I called my uncle. My uncle actually called me later in the day, and he's an orthopedic surgeon. So my grandfather is a pediatrician. We are not spiritually minded people.
right. That's what I mean. Like, marrying those two worlds in you is just amazing. Yes.
Yeah. So my uncle can also validated that that was his experience when he talks to my aunt. That's always what he's doing. He's outside walking. And so I went in to school that day, and I had a professor who was very grounded in psychoanalytic psychotherapy.
Wait, were you married in college?
No, this was grad school.
Oh, okay. Because I'm like, wait,
Yeah,
hold on.
no,
I'm like, you
no,
got
no.
married so young.
I
That's
did get
adorable.
married young. I did get married young, but no, not in college.
No, this was in grad school. Okay. I thought you were like, yes, I got the timeline confused. So I'm like, were you 19 and married? I'm like, that's amazing. That's amazing when you meet your person so early on, you know? Okay. Grad school. Gotcha.
Yeah, no, this was graduate school. And so I went in and I talked to my professor, and she said, "I think you're opening up to something." And I was like, what is she talking about? And she's like, "Go read this." She gave me Sylvia Browne books to read, like Sylvia Browne, like one of those old school psychics.
Oh, I know her well. I know her very, very, very well, but that's all time for another. Yeah, that's another story.
I mean, those were the books, and they were like old, like the books that are like the little rectangle books. And so
I have a Sylvia here. Wait, here's one right behind me. Here's Sylvia Browne, Book of Angels.
Exactly.
I literally saw her in person. Like, Sylvia Browne is like, it has a huge influence on my life. I love that you just talked about her.
And I've never talked about her before in an interview.
I love
Never.
Sylvia. I love her smoky voice. I love that she went bankrupt 6 times. Like, I absolutely love Sylvia Browne.
Well, and that's kind of like the woman who I worked with who trained me was like sort of that like old school looking like hoarse voice psychic. And this professor really encouraged me. She was like, I think you need to open up. She gave me the book. She gave me the name of a friend of hers who was a medium. And she was like, go talk to her. And I was like, yeah, no, like that's not happening. Fast forward many years, my grandfather dies. It happens again, comes through with a very clear message for another cousin getting married. My loved ones like to die and get married
Yeah.
around similar, well, my other cousin, it was a long time, but and then actually at that point it started happening with patients, loved ones. So I was like, all right, I got to get a handle on this. I can't have patients, loved ones coming to me. One, because it just feels like I don't want to open myself up to people coming to me all the time wherever I go. But also, how do I use that information in a way that's useful for them if they're not coming to me specifically because they want to connect with their loved one? And it had never even crossed my mind that this would be a possibility. Nothing that, I mean, I always joke that the gateway drug to spirituality is Brian Weiss's Many Lives, Many Masters book. For
Totally.
those of us who are really like grounded in
Hold on, I think I
science,
have
you've
one
got
behind.
that
I
too.
think I have that one behind me as well. Wait, hold on. I've got that in my bookshelf too. Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was a book I could read because he was a psychiatrist. So it felt like, okay, this fits within like my zeitgeist of what I read and believe. So I started working with this medium. Can you hear my dog barking?
No.
Oh, okay.
Do you
It's
have a
like
dog?
echoing. I do have a dog. And he's so loud and I feel like it's picking up, but maybe
I don't
I'm
hear
just
him at
hearing.
all.
Okay.
I love dogs, by the way. And I love when dogs like interrupt readings and stuff. I think they're the best. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because different dog now, but when I had the first visit from my aunt, the minute that she left, my dog started barking.
Mm.
Like there was clearly
Yeah.
some connection there.
Yeah. He heard
Because I
her
was like,
go.
he must have sensed something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this professor who encouraged me, when after my grandfather died and then the patient started visiting, loved ones started visiting, I was like, I got to get this under control. So I started working with a medium for a period of time to learn and understand how to bring in messages, how to give messages, what those messages look like, how to meditate. I mean, I didn't know how to meditate. I didn't know how to do any of this, but I didn't want to be open in a way that felt violating. And it started to feel that way. My house got under siege. Lights were going on and off. My husband was like, what is going on here? Like this, I don't, he is not a believer. So he's still barely a believer. He's like, this has got to stop. Like, we got to get a handle on this. And so I really dug deep into the medium world to try to figure out what's going on. What is this? How do I use it? I did a medium internship myself. I just called it that and did readings for people for a couple months. They were great. And then I decided it really was not my calling. And so it became, how do I use kind of these intuitive hits? First of all, can I use them in therapy? What would they look like? How do I use them? Without just flat out saying like your loved one's here if someone doesn't want their loved one, or I sometimes get hits of past lives that I see people have had. And I want to use it as a way to help them. But I don't want to say, I think you had a past life. I mean, I work with corporate executives. I work with physicians and lawyers and financial people and marketers and like all very right-brained. I always confuse them.
Yeah, you want to use it as like your strength and part of your service, not to like just, for people that don't even want that, you're just all of a sudden telling them, or you want it to be done in a way that resonates with your incredible, talent and your intelligence in a true way, instead of just like, I think you have a past life, or someone, saying, produce me my past life. And you're like, that's not what's coming up for this.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes
Exactly.
sense.
Or is my, dead mom here and what are they saying? Like, so where I've sort of fallen in all of this is if the information comes in, and it's specifically for loved ones and things like that, and my patients know that this is something I do, because some of them, I mean, most of them know I have a podcast. Some of them have listened. Many do not want to listen. They don't want to know that. But what I've started to do as part of even my intake is just ask people what they believe spiritually. what they believe happens, particularly if I'm working with someone who's grieving. What do you believe happens when we die? Because that's an invitation for people to maybe be curious. Maybe they have a belief that, yeah, I believe that our loved ones are still around us, their energy, and they still can come visit us. And I've had these experiences, but they've never wanted to share them because no one has given them an invitation that it's okay. And I think as part of, I know we talked earlier about grief, as part of the grieving process, this can be a really healing experience. If you've had these experiences, even if you haven't, to be open to them, but certainly so many people have. I mean, the statistics are staggering. I think it's like 60 to 70% of people have had an experience, a visit, a sign, a synchronicity of a loved one who's crossed over. So why aren't we talking about them?
So many people just kind of reason it away.
Yep.
I always laugh with people because they will get an amazing sign and then they'll be like, yeah, that was good. And then they're like, but, and I'm like, oh, did you want a signier sign than that?
Right.
You want a signier
Right.
sign?
You want a flyby banner? Like,
They want their person to like walk in the living room like, hey, it's Uncle Joe. It's like, no, it doesn't work like that, but absolutely we rationalize a lot of it away. And what I love is that, you are, I don't know how to say, it's going to come out weird, but like you have all of that Western medicine understanding and mentality about psychology. And then for you to say, hey, here's the things that I've seen and that I've come across, you just bring so much validity. You can be that crossover person for people that sometimes, when people are like super, maybe way on the other end of spirituality, they really kind of ostracize some people that are just like, that's way too out there for me. Or some people are going to someone that doesn't even believe in life after that's like, oh, that's way too over there. And what's so amazing about you is you can bring a lot of people together and a lot of different kind of thoughts together in what you're doing. And it's really powerful.
well, and that's always been my hope. And that actually was how I ended up starting just the podcast, was because I still am so passionate about this message of the ability to connect and to use, I mean, to connect to loved ones, yes, but also to use our intuition, to use signs and synchronicities and work with the universe in terms of how it can show up for us and how we can use that in our lives. And so I wanted to bring that to people in some way. And because mediumship didn't feel right, it was like I felt like Goldilocks, right? Like, which chair do I want to sit in? Like, one felt too hard, one felt too soft, one felt just right. And this in between, my podcast is the space between. This in between was really for me where I felt like I resided. I wasn't a medium. I don't feel like I am just skilled enough with the accuracy enough to practice that. And I have so much respect for the people that do and are. And I also was like, but I want to bring this into the psychological space because it's so important for people to be able to be open to it and to be curious about it. You don't have to believe it. Just be curious, like journey with me on that. Like come along and see what happens. Worst case, you decide when you die, you die.
Totally. I would say, going from there, like, what have you seen and what has been shown to you? And what have you, after all this work you've done, what do you think happens after we die? And how does that knowledge that you maybe bring to your patients and people you work with, how do you see that knowledge and what you bring to them? How do you see it affect their mental health and their mental state?
So what I think happens when we die is that our energy reconnects in some way to this collective energy that is already within us and out of us. Like, I just believe we return to that space energetically. So I do believe our energy goes on. I don't think, I mean, that's basic physics. I don't think that when we die, we die. And I believe that that energy is always around us and we can connect with it.
And then with that knowledge and like everything that you've learned and you share that with your patients, how do you see that spirituality and spiritual understanding affects people's mental state?
Yeah. So what I've seen is for people who can, I call it grieving and believing, when they can do both together from a grief perspective, I think it can really help move things along. And I want to be clear, it's not about using spirituality as a way of bypassing the grief. And this is probably so, you probably experience this all the time when someone has lost a loved one and they want to connect with you, and then they want to connect with you again, and then they want to connect with you again because they still want that connection. The connection changes. It's not the same. You can still have a relationship with your loved one, but it is not going to be like you and I are sitting here talking. They are not always going to be there whenever you want them to be. You're not going to be able to just conjure them up whenever you want them to be. And it's certainly not like picking up the phone and calling someone. It's going to feel very different. And so you have to renegotiate what that relationship is going to look like. And you have to grieve the fact that they are not physically here anymore, and that you as a human made a choice to come here to experience what it means to be human. And part of what it means to be human is you experience loss and pain and sadness and anger and resentment, and also joy and beauty and love and peace and calm and happiness. That is the whole of being a human being. And I think that it's so important for people to understand that when they're grieving, because you can't get away from it. No amount of medium readings is ever going to get you over your grief. You just have to move through it, and you will never get over it. It will always be right beside you.
I just think that truer words have never been spoken. Is that the expression?
Yeah.
Have never been spoken.
Yeah.
No, I just think that is so incredibly accurate. It's like you cannot escape grief. And that's why, for me, it's like, that's why I like to teach people how to tune into their own intuition and how to connect with their loved ones on their own. That's why I like to bring people the things that I've learned, so that it doesn't mean you don't grieve, but it means as you're grieving, bringing in some other kind of tools or support along the way. Even when I'm grieving, my dear friend, and it's like I get in the depths of grief still so deep. And then I start to remember that she was on her own path. And I use the things that I've learned not to not grieve, but to assist my mental state and also help my spiritual experience elevate as well to higher understanding. And that's what I hear you saying, that it can't be taken away. It's a renegotiation of that relationship. And that's just the most amazing way to put it, really.
Yeah. And I think where medium, someone like you, can be super effective, one is in the grieving process. Like, I think people should be encouraged to go see really reputable mediums in their grief process, because it can be a huge tool for healing. And to maybe use it to help you get validation if you've had experiences. Because I think if you are, like you said, you teach people to connect. That's some of what I do as well. So they can start to tap into their own abilities, their own psychic intuition, and then have someone who validates that for them. Oh, when you saw this, this sign, that was your mother. And you're like, oh my God, I did see that sign. So then you can start to really trust yourself a little bit more in terms of what your intuition is bringing to you and showing you.
Yeah, I love that too, because when you start to trust yourself, as you said, and you start to listen to your own inner voice, then you start to become more clear in your path and your purpose. And then you start to shine that more. And then you kind of lift up the world, really, because we're all connected. So connecting with your own self, trusting your own inner voice, that's it. There's the secret. There's the secret to life. Listen to yourself. God's in there.
And that's what you said in terms of mental health. That's exactly the piece, because you start to tap into these things, and then you start to trust that the world is going to, for the most part, cooperate. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to experience hardships and difficulties, but then you're using your spirituality, again, not to bypass the experience, but to use it to help you understand that experience. What is the lesson in this for me that I need to use to learn and grow my soul?
Absolutely. Amen. Are you guys loving this podcast? I'm like, oh my, I'm just staring at Amy. And the whole time you're talking, I'm like, gosh, I really love her. I really love, she's amazing. And then you'll say something and I'm like, God, that the way she just said that just cut me so deep. I'm like, that went straight to my heart.
Oh, I love this. This is like a happy party for me.
It's a love fest.
It's a love fest.
No, that is beautiful. And I love, I love how you're talking about reconnecting into the whole and the collective consciousness, and that you are still you and can connect, but it's so important that people understand it's not the same. They're not sitting in their chair watching their TV shows. And I always tell people, you don't want them to. You don't want your Uncle Joe haunting your house. Trust me. You want them to be in spirit. And then when I read for people and they come through, spirit comes through in all kinds of ways. Sometimes I'm like, whoa, this person's really close. And I need to like get my feet back on the ground and really ground. And sometimes it's like they feel they're like a whisper. And it's not because they're not there, but there's, souls go at different levels to different places and different experiences.
And they're working on different things on the other side. They have their own little assignments over there that they're working on sorting through.
Absolutely. And a lot of healing too. You would be amazed at how many people I see at like baby animal petting farms, petting zoos. I see so many people with animals.
Huh. That's so interesting.
A lot of healing with animals.
Right.
So they'll be, like in a beautiful field and they'll be like baby lambs and little.
Well, but that's the unconditional love, right? That we're
Yeah,
all, I
it's
feel like
healing.
we're all seeking is just that oneness, that unity, that love that we all so desperately want to feel.
Yeah. That sweetness, that gentleness, that unconditioned. Yes, absolutely.
And the purity.
Purity. And it's healing. Animals are so healing. There's all kinds of animal therapy. But I see that a lot of people sitting with animals. It's so cute. And usually it'll be people that are like, oh my God, they were obsessed with animals, so that makes sense that is their healing. So yeah, people are all different. They're in healing. They've taken on different jobs. They've taken on different roles. Absolutely.
Right. They're different levels of whether or not they're going to come back.
Absolutely. I mean, I think
probably advise them against that.
Yeah. Well, time is very different here than there.
Mm-hmm.
It's so different. So for us, it's like, gosh, we haven't seen them in a lifetime. But for them, it's just the blink of an eye. The timing is very different. So people always ask me, oh my God, are they going to reincarnate before I get there? And then we don't see each other? It's like, no, that doesn't happen.
Well, and I think this is a really interesting question. I'm curious your thoughts on this. I go back and forth, but if we are all connected and one and are sourced, even when we're a soul, then we're there and here simultaneously.
Correct. That is what time is. Absolutely. So like time is a circle. There's no beginning, middle, or end, right? It's a circle. So everything is kind of happening all at once. So sometimes when you go somewhere and you're like, God, this is so haunted, it's not. You're just somewhere where there's other layers of time happening. It's not like, a spirit didn't die and they're back and they're haunting you, right? So like when I go to, historical sites, especially here in Philadelphia, we have so much history. It's so cool. And like go to Betsy Ross's house where she sewed the flag, right? It's like, no, I don't see Betsy Ross sitting there. Like, oh, hello. So glad a medium's here. So you can tell them that I actually had brown hair, not blonde or whatever.
I have to say, when you just started to say that, I think it sounded like her voice came through. It was very crazy. Keep going. I was like, wait, what's happening?
But do I sense like other energy there? Yes, but those are layers of time. So with what you're saying is like, yes, maybe they're incarnated, but they're also there. We can be at multiple places at once. That's why doing inner child work is so powerful. Like if you go back to yourself, say you had a traumatic event when you were 9, you go back to yourself as an adult in your mind to your 9-year-old and tell her you're going to show up for her and she's going to be okay. That starts to heal you on multiple layers through multiple ages,
Mm-hmm.
That's why, because of time. Mm-hmm. Speaking of this trippy topic, let's talk about smoking frog. Is it frog guts?
Toad venom. Frog guts.
You're like, totally not what it is, Erika, but thanks.
Yeah.
We, Amy and I had a little conversation in the beginning about psilocybin and about toad.
That all was triggered by me saying that my mic was as high as it could go. And you were like, are you high? And I was like, are you on edibles? I'm like, no, I don't do edibles.
She went, I'm as high as I can go, meaning her sound. We were talking about sound. And I'm like, Amy, what's happening? Did you eat edibles before our podcast? She was like, what? No. And then we started talking about psychedelics as a way to assist and support mental health and also treat mental issues, which Amy now is learning a lot about. And I just want to say also, there is this whole fad going on about microdosing and doing all these things. And I think that's amazing. And also, there's so much unknown. Work with someone who is taking courses, who's learning about things, who's talking to other people, who's actually understanding these things if you want to try them, like Amy, instead of just hitting the streets and, eating some mushrooms, which listen, do what you want. But I'm just saying, if you're looking for the true benefits, maybe do it in a way that's protected and safe, right?
Well, so first of all, none of this is legal except ketamine and psilocybin it's legal in Oregon and decriminalized in Colorado right now. Everything other than ketamine, MDMA is in phase 3 trials right now, waiting for FDA approval once they finish the phase 3 trials, and then we'll see where they go. But MDMA and psilocybin are both in clinical trials, specifically for MDMA for PTSD and psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression. So those are the trials that are happening right now. In terms of what you said, there is a lot of curiosity around psychedelics right now. Part of my reason for wanting to try them is because I wanted to understand, as a clinician who's been working with people for 20 years, and some people get stuck in their healing and they cannot move forward. And no matter how many medications, psychotropic meds they've tried, SSRIs, they still cannot get better. Therapy, medications, they've tried, all sorts of things. And there's a lot of really exciting research coming out. There's a lot of hope. Actually, the research on microdosing isn't there yet, because it's very, very difficult to do a clinical trial with microdosing because you have to do it a certain amount of days. It has to be very controlled. That doesn't mean that people don't find it useful. It's just there's not a lot of research behind it. So just for people to be mindful of that. And I'm by no means an expert in this field. Like, I am at the beginning of my journey because I want to find ways to help people continue to heal, because I believe this world needs healing. And it's just, people need so much help right now, and people need to heal. And there's so much pain, and there's so much destruction, and there's so much anger. And I don't want it to be that way. I don't think anybody does, but people don't know where to turn. And the hope is that these drugs, which will hopefully someday be medicines, because they can't be considered medicine until they're legalized, that they will then be another tool. I want to be clear. They are a tool. They are not a panacea. They are not a magic bullet. You don't have one psilocybin trip and you're suddenly cured of everything. They are a tool to open up and expand consciousness in a way that, for me personally, I have not experienced, both personally and professionally, the ability to access that just on its own. However, you probably could get there with something like transformational breath work, sound healing. Holotropic breath work, Stanislas Graf's work, that came out of the psychedelic movement, is extremely powerful and can bring you into a similar psychedelic state that psychedelics can. So there are other ways to get there. Sound meditations, meditation in general can get you to these kind of expansive states of consciousness. But I think the difference for me has always been that your ego can always seemingly slip right back in. Like, the ego is very, very hard to manage. With psychedelics, it's much quieter. So it's either gone, which can be really scary for people. That's what people call an ego death when they experience the ego death. It's not really gone, but it's just so quiet that it can't keep intervening in the way that it is always in our heads, telling us, like, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not worthy, you're not lovable. All of the things that the ego does as an attempt, it thinks, to protect us, get quieted in those experiences. So you can really experience what it feels like to love, what it feels like to connect, what that unity experience feels like, what it feels like to surrender, to trust, to let go, all these things that we're talking about. And it isn't without difficulties as well. So I don't want to paint these experiences as these beautiful, godlike experiences, which I think a lot of people hear and they're like, I want that. I
Yes.
can tell you, I've actually yet to have that in any of my journeys. So I'm still waiting.
No, but I love that you're saying that because, like I said, there's so much out there of people like, I am a psilocybin guru, high priestess, and listen to me. And I'm kind of like, wait a minute. Hold on. Just like you're doing, you're looking into it. You're at the beginning of your journey, research and learning. And that's amazing. It's not just something to like, let's throw some psilocybin at them, see what happens. Like you're taking that care to really look into that. It's really amazing. So I would just say to everyone listening to just research, find someone you trust. Don't just go with a hype and a fad and start taking shit because it's not regulated. It's not medicine yet, as Amy said.
And there's a very different experience going to a rave or going to a concert and tripping and doing mushrooms or MDMA and having a set and setting that is intentional for healing. Very different experiences. One is not better or worse than the other. It's just a different intention in which you're going into it with. And so the medicine will likely show up differently for you in those settings. And that doesn't mean that you can't have amazing experiences in a recreational way with the medicines, but that's not what the research is looking at. It's not like, did you go to a rave and cure your PTSD? It's
totally. And that's the distinction that I was talking about, that if you're looking at this, which some people are, as to really treat a symptom, just make sure you're looking at in the right places. Right.
Right. And what we're really looking is beyond the symptoms. We're looking at getting to the root of what is keeping people stuck and helping them move through that. So it doesn't keep them stuck anymore. So they can start to see their life in a different way.
So did you do toad magic? Smoke toad? You smoke it?
I did smoke toad.
Can you tell me about that? Because I saw one video of someone doing it that had an incredible experience. How was it? What was it like?
It was an extremely powerful experience. It was scary, I would say. It was pretty scary for me. The first time I've done it a couple times. The second time not as scary.
Before it or during it?
Not before, because I didn't know what I was getting into. So I really was pretty naive, and I'm glad that I was, because I think had I not been, I probably would have worked myself up more. I just had someone reach out and they were like, oh, I think this would be something you might want to be interested in. And I was like, So I explored it. I did some research, but for me, the physical, like I always understood the words, like you hold energy in your body and we hold trauma in our bodies. But those are just cognitive experiences. Like I've been doing in this business for a long time. So I've read a gajillion books on trauma and healing and what it means to hold things in your body. And so intellectually, yes, okay, what does that mean? But to actually physically feel what it means to hold and release trauma, I felt like I had rid myself of cancer that I didn't even know was growing inside of me. Like I always describe that experience in Lost. If people, I'm definitely not 24 if I say Lost right now. The TV show. Did you watch that?
No, but I hear you.
It was a TV show that was on like in the early thousands. Is that what we say? The early thousands? The early 2000s?
Was that long ago?
Yeah, it was.
Shit.
I know.
Doesn't feel that long ago.
And there was this black smoke that used to come out with this rattle. And in my experience, I felt like that smoke was being like squeezed, like I was a tube of toothpaste and it was just getting squeezed out of me. And it was like all this negative energy was just coming together and coming out. Like it was just constant. And I was like, holy cow.
Are you unconscious? So you take it, you smoke it, and you lay down and you visualize this, or you feel it physically?
Yeah, you visualize it. I didn't, after the initial like hit, you're down pretty quickly. So, I mean, you're down and out. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I was laying down. And then it just, then I honestly don't recall what happened. I just remember there being this physical feeling of like my body being squeezed and all of this coming out, all of this coming out. And actually, interestingly, what I think a lot of it was my patient's trauma, and a lot of what I've held on to listening to people over the course of 20 years, and how much, one, I think it speaks to what we're talking about spiritually, is how connected we all are, even if we try not to be, and how we pick up on people's energy. I mean, now I think I do a much better job of protecting my energy, because a lot of what was then started to come into my consciousness was old patients, like their stories and their traumas. And so that's what started to come up after I was kind of more conscious again. And I was like, oh, that was what was released from an energetic, physical level. And now here it is in my consciousness, and I just have to let go of it in that way. And there was a lot of crying. Like, I just cried a lot. And so, and what I've learned of myself since doing these journeys is that I think I release a lot physically. Like, that's just what my body and my soul need in order to release. I mean, I was in therapy for 17 years. I worked with an embodiment coach. I've always been kind of in the therapy space in that way. And this was just has felt like such a different way for me to be able to continue to heal, like the depths, the ancestral trauma that we all hold, like the collective trauma that we all hold. It's all there for us. And so we are connected, and we have to be mindful of how connected we all are. And this just showed me that. And I think that when people say, like, I had this beautiful unity experience, that's awesome. I'm going to get that one day.
Yeah.
But for me, it was like, yes, we are all unified, but it didn't show up for me in the lightest of ways. It was pretty heavy.
How long are you out for?
Again, talk about time in those spaces. Time is totally distorted. It's like a complete distortion of reality. So I think it was 15 minutes, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah,
So one hit,
it's
you're out
very quick.
15 minutes and have a life-changing experience.
You can. Yes.
And did you feel okay the next day?
Totally fine.
You're fine.
Totally fine. But you can experience reactivations. So where, like, 2 weeks later, I was sitting in a yoga class and they hit a sound bowl, and I was like, oh boy. Like, I knew that I needed to ground myself, because I
Wow.
felt the intensity of the experience starting to come back, and that same physical squeezing starting to happen again. So I was like, okay, you're okay. You are. And again, because I've been doing work on myself and I have a lot of tools, I knew what I needed. So I wasn't going to freak out.
Right.
I
Sure.
knew that I needed to breathe. I knew I needed to ground. I knew I needed to open my eyes. I knew I needed to, like, say to myself, like, you are okay. Feel the floor around you. So I could come back into my body, because you can get really expansive from any of those things on their own, from breath work, from sound healing. Your energy expands. And so it's really important to know the tools to bring yourself back. The other thing that was really, really amazing was that I watched my brain circuits that night, like, rewire. So I felt like I was watching a computer almost come back online.
Wow.
And that's one of the benefits that they're finding with these drugs, is the neuroplasticity of the brain as a result of using the drugs.
You change.
It changes, it rewires your brain. I had a supervisor once who explained this to me really well, when she was talking about, we were talking about depression and medication. And she's like, when you don't medicate for depression, you fall in the hole, maybe you bring yourself back out. But then the next time you fall in the hole's a little bit deeper. And every time you fall in, it keeps getting deeper. And what medication can do is help make that hole smaller, so you don't fall down it as much anymore. So when
Mhm.
you think about that, like, you're on these same tracks all the time. Sometimes those tracks need to not be so deep. I don't know if that's a clinical way of thinking about it, but that's how I kind of envision
No,
it.
you painted. I'm completely visualizing what you're saying. So that's amazing. So, okay. So two more questions, but was MDMA similar kind of experience?
No, very different. It was intense for me at times in other ways, but it was very joyful. It felt like what it would feel like to just be free,
Mm,
like free of it all, like free of the heaviness of a body. Like I said, like I feel the physical, that's become very apparent to me in these. Like I feel my physical body like it is a suit. And when I'm wearing it, I'm like, oh God. And when I leave it, I'm like, I don't know that I actually leave it, but it feels like I've left it. I'm
Yeah.
like, this freedom is great.
Mm.
And it's like, okay, so I felt this freedom. How can I bring that freedom into my everyday life? Where else can I find places where I can feel free like that? Because they're there. And that's the beauty, I think, of the drugs, is that you're able to access these things and to feel these things. And then it's like, okay, I know it's there. I can create it in my life. And how do I create it in my life? And it might not be every day, but you find pockets of it.
That's right. And like, think about what we were talking about in the beginning of like having spiritual truths and why do we care? Because it can affect your life. You can conceptualize them and you're like, oh, okay, I can apply this here. Same thing. It sounds like with these experiences,
Mm-hmm.
that's why it's so exciting to, talk about things you've experienced or talk about spirituality that I've learned from reading for thousands of people for the past 15 years, because it can give people something. So, after people hang up the phone after they're reading, they're not like, what do I do now? They're like, wow, I have something to take with me. Not just, the amazing messages from my loved ones, but I have higher knowledge and that's going to help my actual day-to-day life.
Exactly. And I want to just bring this back to the psychedelics, is the actual research is not just on the molecules and what they're doing. They're psychedelic assisted therapy. So the therapy is a huge component of this because we have to still process what we've experienced. So the difference
Right.
between like you going on and doing this therapeutically maybe one time and not processing it isn't going to give you, that's what the research is showing. It's not as effective as if you're doing the therapeutic piece along with it. And I think with mediumship as well, like it's great that your loved one came through. Now what?
Totally.
What do you do with it after that?
I say that so much. Like, spirit guides want to give you something that when you hang up the phone, you're not just sitting there like, well, that was nice, but now what? It's
Right.
something else. It's assimilation into your actual life. Like what you're saying, the therapeutic component. And that's what I was saying earlier as well, is like, I have no judgment on what drugs people do, but what we're talking about is something different. It's therapeutic, it's assisted, like you're saying, assimilating it into your life to actually use it as a healing component, as a healing medicine,
Right. And to use your intuition in the same way.
Totally.
Using your intuition is a way to continue to help you heal, as a way to continue to find your journey, your path, your truth, your experience in this life in a physical human body.
That's so amazing. So my last question I want to ask you, I had written down when we were
Oh, come
talking.
on. We have to finish.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to miss you so much. Come visit. But it was interesting because we were talking about, and you were saying how, there's just so many people need help right now. And why are people so sad? Why is this such a hard time? What do you think is like some of the biggest factors? Because when we can look at that, we can think about things we can do in our life to counterbalance that.
I think we've gotten so disconnected. We are not living the way we used to live. We're not living in community the way we used to live in community. And I think that because of that disconnection, we see someone else as other and we don't see ourselves in them.
Yeah.
And I think that has led to this chasm that we're experiencing, that we're seeing right now, because there's no ability for me to look at you and say, I see me in you and you in me. And so they don't have love and compassion for that other person.
And people are so lonely.
So lonely because they're so disconnected from themselves and everybody around them.
Everyone else. And the earth, you know what I mean? We are inundated with more technology today than any other humans in our history of humanity, that can create that separation.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because my neighbor, hopefully doesn't listen to this podcast, but if she does, maybe she'll keep her garage open a little bit longer. Literally, like, and I live in Chicago, so I get it on some level, but like it could be the middle of the day and my garage is open and she pulls in and like shuts the garage door before, like she even gets out of the car, which sometimes I do too at night. But it's like, if I see a neighbor, I'll step out and be like, hey, how are you? It's those little things that we just don't do anymore. It's like we come in our house, close the door, we shut ourselves in,
Go on our screen, look
right?
at the propaganda media
Absolutely.
that's just being force fed to us. Yes, and we don't know what's real, and then we get all riled up and fired up about shit and yell at people
Right. And
online.
right. Exactly. But things we would never say to someone's face, because
Correct.
when you have to look someone in the eye and have that connection. And this is why I'm also like a huge proponent of, if you're in therapy, get back in the office with your therapist, because I think there's so much more that happens in that human connection in real life that is so powerful and so meaningful that you can't get it through a screen. I mean, you just can't. There's the energetic feeling it feels like to sit with another human being.
Oh, and like, why do we even need to advocate for that? Like, of course, but it's true. People are like, no, we can do it on Zoom. I mean, I work on Zoom, but it's interesting. I don't know if you've read this, that like an hour on Zoom is like 2 hours for in person, because our brains are constantly and consistently scanning people's faces for facial gestures and little like winks and things like that. So we're scanning. And those gestures are really, really hard to see on Zoom, even if you can see someone clearly. So our body is constantly scanning, or our mind is scanning for clues, and it can't get it. So we are doubly scanning. So it's really exhausting to actually, more exhausting than in person, to work on Zoom.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
And we never get that satisfaction of like, oh, they seem happy. Oh, they're thinking. Oh, it's like we can't quite get that same energetic connection, like you're saying.
I mean, there's so much that people say without actually using words to say it.
Absolutely.
And if you just like see my little head.
Yeah, I know. You can just see me floating. I'm literally, you guys, I'm wearing an Adidas sweatshirt. Like,
I'm wearing sweatpants that would
Are you
match
wearing
very
sweatpants?
cutely. Oh, yeah. Look at these.
oh my God, we're a matching set. She's wearing Adidas sweatpants. I'm wearing an
they're
Adidas
not
sweatshirt.
Adidas. They're not Adidas, but they'd go perfectly with your sweatshirt.
I'm like, this is my least cute look, but it's good. It's fine. It's fine.
It's cozy.
I know, it's very cozy. Oh my gosh. So how can people hang with you after they hear this podcast? How can they get to know you better, connect with you? Tell me all the ways.
So you can listen to my podcast, Life, Death, and the Space Between, if you want more stuff like Erika talks about. I kind of explore like mediumship, near-death experiences, but I also talk a lot about consciousness, where the research is on a lot of these experiences, alternative ways of healing, in medical intuitives, kind of past lives. I try to like run the whole gamut of things in this consciousness expanding space, psychedelics. I am not taking patients in my practice. I will be doing psychedelic integration only once I finish my course, which is coming up soon, which will be done soon. So in the new year, I'll be doing some integration work, hopefully. And I'm launching a program, hopefully also in the new year, called Live Your Life Backwards, which is something we actually didn't talk that much about, which is using the lens of death as a way to really illuminate how you live your life.
I know, we really didn't. But you know what's interesting about this episode is like, I feel like everything that came up is exactly what was meant to come up. And I feel like we could have had 8 different podcasts today.
Totally.
And this one was like, it's exactly what was needed. So her podcast is amazing. I love your podcast. I was also on it.
Yes.
So you listened to my episode.
You could listen to our banter.
But she has amazing. I look at her guest list. I'm like, whoa.
Thank you.
This is like VIP only. It's really amazing. And you're so good. And it's such a great podcast. So listen to that, you guys. And then you can also follow Amy. What's your handle?
Yeah, Dr. Amy Robbins. And my website is dramyrobbins.com. So you can drop me an email there. I've sort of been off Instagram because it's felt very toxic to me. But I pop in and out. So if you want to get in touch with me, email is probably a great way to do that. And that's all through my website, dramyrobbins.com.
Thank you so much for doing this and for being on this show and this beautiful conversation.
Thank you so much. This was just awesome.
Oh, I had the best time with you. I had the best time.
Good, good. So did I. I'm like, why does it have to end? My sister always says, don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And everyone's going to love this and love hearing you. And
I hope so.
to
Thank
everyone
you.
listening, thank you for hanging out with Amy and I today. Thank you for sticking with me through this podcast. You guys are amazing. And the messages I get, thank you so, so much. And my greatest kind of intention and hope and prayer is that there was something said here today that served you and that assisted you and that you can take with you. As you know, I think of you guys so, so much, and I love you. And I am here if you need me at Spiritual Medium Erika. You guys know that. You can always email info@erikagabriel.com. But if you take nothing else away from this podcast, this episode, just take with you and know deep in your heart that you are not alone. God bless, guys. I love you, and we'll talk soon.